it was like everything I believed had just been thrown right in my face, and I couldn't deny it anymore. And I remember both laughing and crying, because I was laughing at myself for being what I called a fool, being so sure of myself about all these things when I seem to be so wrong, and crying because I was given all these beautiful insights into how to move forward, how to improve my quality of life, both physically and emotionally, with very specific actions that I could take.
I'm very happy to have Justin Birkholz with me today. Hi, Justin. How are you?
IT, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
In 2015, you had a pivotal event that changed your entire life. Can you tell me what happened?
Yeah, so in 2015, I was working as a restaurant manager in Seattle area, and the restaurant I was managing at the time was on a highway, and it was kind of on like a curve. And one night a week, I worked overnight, and it was the night that we received the shipment with all of our food and other paper products and all that kind of stuff. And I would come in when the closing manager left for the night, and I would work by myself overnight, unloading all of the product and taking inventory and doing all that kind of behind the scenes work to make sure, the restaurant keeps running. And so I did this one night a week. And unfortunately, this night in January of 2015, I had done that shift where I had worked overnight and I was supposed to leave in the morning. It was 6 a.m. on a January morning in Seattle. It was very dark. It was foggy. It was rainy. Pretty much worst possible, visibility and kind of driving conditions. And as I was pulling out of the driveway to leave work, I guess I didn't see a truck that was coming around the highway on the curve there. And so I pulled out, and it basically T-boned me right into my driver's side door, at what they called highway speed, according to the police report, which is pretty fast. So basically, this truck was kind of whipping around the bend, didn't slow down at all, and just slammed right into the driver's side of my car door. Um, so needless to say, I'm pretty lucky to be alive coming out of an accident like that. I mean, it could very easily could have, been a fatal accident. And so what happened was, it kind of destroyed the left side of my body. So I had a really hard blow to the face. My window shattered, and all the glass and everything kind of went into the side of my face, and then it just broke like all the left side of my ribs. Left side of my skull was fractured in multiple places, injured my left shoulder and my left knee, and I had a bunch of shards of glass stuck into all the side of my face and neck and stuff, and a really severe traumatic brain injury from getting, hit in the head so hard. And so I ended up somehow my car had spun, 180 degrees, and it was actually facing backwards from where I had pulled out. And my car had ended up in the middle of the highway, and it was still dark and rainy, and there were cars going by and stuff. So somehow I managed to pull myself out through the passenger side door of the car and crawled up onto the sidewalk there, and I ended up calling 911 myself. Um, and all I knew was like, hey, I've been severely injured. I've been in a really bad accident. I need, EMTs ASAP. And I wasn't really aware of what else was going on. And so I remember sitting there on the curb, and my boss had just shown up to the restaurant that day for the opening shift. And I remember him coming up and seeing me there, and obviously, being very concerned for me. And so he kind of stood there by me and held me and kind of, waited for the EMTs to come. And I was drifting in and out of consciousness for, I don't know how long it took them, 5, 10 minutes, whatever it was. Um, and then I remember them picking me up and getting me into the ambulance. And so it was kind of at that point that I had what I would call like a, near death experience, where my consciousness was kind of drifting in and out. My skull was fractured. I was struggling to move or do anything, but they got me in there, and as we were going down the freeway to the trauma center, luckily I was very close to like a world class trauma center called Harborview in downtown Seattle. They have like medical dramas are filmed there, and people are helicoptered in from states away to get care there. So I was very fortunate, to be where I was. But as we're going down the highway, I'm going in and out of consciousness, and the experience I had was, I basically felt like I was going to die. Like I had this overwhelming sense of like fear and like my life was coming to an end, and I kind of was just going in and out of states of just black, like nothingness. Like I described it to someone like I felt like I was kind of like going in and out of existence. It wasn't like I was falling asleep and waking up. It was like I was gone, and then I was there again, and I was gone, and I was there again. But at one point, I have this really specific memory of kind of coming to and being in the ambulance. And at this point, the EMTs were actually cutting my clothes off of me because I was too injured. They couldn't take it off normally. And I was very attached to my designer jacket that I had. I was like, no, don't do that. And I was freaking out about that. But which was kind of funny. Um, but I remember having this really strong sense at one point that I had come back and that I was actually going to live. It was like there was this time period of I don't know how long where I really felt like I was dying and I was going to die, and I kept going into blackness and stuff, and so I was really afraid for my life. And then at a certain point I came to, and I stopped losing consciousness, and I immediately knew I had this sense that I was going to make it, that I was going to live. And I started just crying tears of joy. And the EMTs are standing over me, like I said, cutting my clothes off of me at this point, and I just laying there in the ambulance just crying because I knew that I was going to make it and that I was going to see my loved ones again. And it was really, really overwhelming in that moment. And it was right then that, uh, I made a conscious decision to not take any time for granted anymore. Because I was young, I was still in my early 20s or whatever at that point, and I like to party, and I was living that life of a young person, not necessarily very intentional. I wasn't really doing much with my life, I guess you could say. And I kind of knew at that point that major changes were going to happen from that moment.
And so that must have really shook you to the core. What were your beliefs prior to this happening, your spiritual or religious beliefs?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very religious, very Christian household. My father graduated from seminary, to be a pastor. He didn't actually end up being a pastor. He went back to school to get another master's degree, which is kind of the family I come from. We like to read. We're kind of nerdy, as you might be able to tell. And so, that was kind of the background I came from, was like this like Southern Baptist, very conservative, very Christian. And that was how I lived up until I was a young adult, maybe, 17, 18. I kind of had like a rebellious phase where I wasn't exactly satisfied with the kind of answers to the existential questions that I got from that, religion, and from my community there. And so I was kind of like agnostic, I guess you would say. I just felt um like I didn't really see much value in like religion or spirituality or any of that kind of stuff at the time that this happened. And I had been in that place for a few years, previous to the accident. Um, and even at the time, that didn't necessarily change right away. It did change 2 years later, and we'll get to that story, I'm sure, soon. But yeah, at that time, I was not religious, not spiritual, nothing like that. Um, but I knew that even if I didn't believe in like God or anything like that, I knew that I wanted to be more intentional with my life. And I knew I wanted to take better care of my health and that kind of thing. I didn't want to take my health or my life for granted anymore after that point. The next 2 years were tough for a lot of reasons. My car had been totaled. I was fairly poor at the time. Working in restaurants, you don't have a lot of extra spending money, even as a manager. Um, I had to buy a new car. I was severely injured. I had massive hospital bills. Um, I ended up getting kicked out of my apartment. It's a long story I don't want to go into, but it was related to this. And I had some relational issues with my partner who too, we had been together for several years at this point, but it was a very difficult time. I couldn't express emotion. The nerves in my face were injured and all the bones were fractured. So I literally couldn't smile for like 8 months. Yeah, I couldn't do any kind of physical activity, couldn't be intimate with any, it was like I was really struggling for 2 years afterwards just uh to find something worth living for, I guess. I wanted to be alive and I wanted to do something more, but it was like everything that I had cared about and everything that I was proud about, like my physical abilities and all this stuff, all of that was gone. It was like everything had been taken from me that I felt was like myself and the values and characteristics of myself that I valued. I mean, and so it was a very difficult time to deal with the emotions of all those things that I was going through. But I I knew that, like I said, I wanted to be more intentional. I wanted to do something positive. I just didn't know what that was. And I was struggling just to be alive for a couple of years. And it took me 2 years to figure out what to do and to have the complete change of mind and heart to really redirect my focus. And that was after an interesting incident that was 2 years almost exactly after my accident.
Is
um,
this the event that changed your spiritual beliefs that you were talking about earlier?
yeah, so I had what people would call like a mystical experience, which when I tell people about this experience, it's much more similar to what a lot of people see or experience when they go through a near death experience. And so essentially, I had a very strange experience where I had an out of body, you know, experience, mystical experience. And what happened was I'd been suffering with all the pain and doing the physical, rehabilitation, all that kind of stuff for a few years. And I had been getting better and getting better and getting better, but I had some lingering issues, some physical pain with my jaw because of the impact on one side. It had messed up the way my jaw connects. So I had TMJ and all this other stuff, and some issues with my upper neck for the same reason, just because the impact had messed everything up. And I remember laying back on my bed and having this experience where I felt like some kind of presence was guiding me to make this very specific kind of like chiropractic adjustment kind of move with my head and neck. It was like a download, I guess, as people describe it, where I don't know why or what was telling me to do this, but it was very specific. And when I did that, it was like I had this total out of body experience. Like literally, I was laying on the bed and then my consciousness just like popped out of my body and I was up above and I could see myself, and then it was just myself and like a bright light, like God or the, angel or my higher self or whatever it was there with me. And it was like we were looking down on my body And all of a sudden I was getting all of these, downloads or thoughts or insights that were coming to me about ways that I was behaving, things that I was doing physically with my posture, mental habits that I was getting stuck into, and all these things that were really just bringing me down and causing me suffering. But it was like my own kind of behavior and mental loops and things that I had gotten stuck into, um, over the years. And it was like all of a sudden in this moment, I could see very clearly, what I was doing and how to fix it and how to move forward. And I came into contact with something that was a spiritual being of some kind. And at this time, like I said, I was still very like agnostic or atheist or whatever. Um, and so that really shook me. That was the experience that totally blew my mind, changed my whole perspective on life, on spirituality, on what happens after we die, everything. It was like it was the best way I can describe it is I didn't believe in God, but it was like I had met God. And so there was a real existential kind of shock there, and like this really crazy moment I went through of, well, what did I experience and why was it so helpful, because it was giving me like very specific messages of like, you need to fix your posture in exactly this way, and you get stuck in this depressive rumination in this way because you have these kinds of thoughts and you let yourself get stuck in those negative patterns, and it's causing you this emotional suffering and stuff. Like, it was like these very, very personal and specific messages I got. And I remember being so overwhelmed by it and so overwhelmed by my own uh like arrogance and like my because I was so sure that there was like nothing to religion and nothing, there was no God and all this stuff. And then it was like everything I believed had just been thrown right in my face and I couldn't deny it anymore. And I remember both laughing and crying, because I was laughing at myself for being what I called a fool, being so sure of myself about all these things when I seem to be so wrong, and crying because I was given all these beautiful insights into how to move forward, how to improve my quality of life, both physically and emotionally, with very specific actions that I could take. And I was able to take those and go with that. And it's been a really beautiful, process these last 7, 8 years or whatever since then.
Were you able to heal yourself from these, I guess, bits of advice that you received?
Yeah, so immediately right there in the experience, my TMJ and my other issues with my jaw were healed, gone. It was like, horrible pain right up until then, and then that was gone immediately. And then the same thing, I had struggled with my inner life, my mental and emotional life. Like I said, I had really struggled with depressive rumination. I didn't know that that's what it was. Um, I learned that later, but I got a message, and the message was that I was stuck in these negative thought patterns, and that I could stop that. That there were ways for me to change that, and that if I did things like meditation and other practices, that there were ways that I could retrain my mind to be a much calmer, much safer place, a much better kind of inner life. And I've definitely been able to do that. And I had to do a lot of research to figure out, what those practices were. I had to have the discipline to do them, daily for years, that kind of thing. But it's totally and completely changed not only my own inner experience, which is, the biggest part of your quality of life is, what's your inner experience like? But it's changed the way I interact with my family, with my friends, with my pets, and everyone who knows me will tell you that I'm a very different person today than I was, 8, 9 years ago or before this. Just completely different to be around. Um, Much more positive, much more energetic, uh, much more excited about life and that kind of thing. And my interests have vastly changed. Now I'm reading books about spirituality. I've studied quite a few different spiritual traditions deeply. And those were things I just didn't care about at all before.
Do you feel this being was really God that you met?
I am not sure. It didn't seem to be any part of me that I would ever been aware of. It seemed to be aware of things that I wasn't. So I don't know if it was God or if it was, like I said, an angel or something like that. It knew a lot more about my inner life and my inner struggles than I did. It was more aware of that than I was. So that's why I think it was some kind of higher spiritual being. Um, I'm hesitant to make any kind of claims about God or anything like that, just because I still don't think, I know I don't want to be like too sure of myself when it comes to that. But whatever it was, it cared for me. It wanted me to heal. And it had deep insights into my inner life and awareness of my inner life and what I needed to heal that I wasn't aware of and had never and it put thoughts into my head that about things I never had thought about before. Um and for a week afterwards, I had a very strange experience that every day I would come home from work and I would come home, I would cook dinner for myself and my partner like I always did. And then I felt absolutely compelled to sit down at my computer and write. It was like this energy was just inside of me and it had to express itself. And so for about a week, I would go through my whole day and then I would sit down and I would sit at my computer and like a paragraph of like weird writing would just pop out of me, like just boom, fully formed. And it was like these concepts and things I didn't think about and didn't know about. And it was like these very specific messages that were coming to me from, I don't know if it was from that same source. I don't know if it was that being or what, but it was the only time in my life I felt like I had channeled messages or something like that. Is the best way I can describe it. I write a lot. I write all the time. I've published books and I have a blog and stuff, but I've never written like that. It was like something else was writing through me, to me. And so I wrote those down and I have them. I have a list of them. I called them divine emanations or something. I saved it. And they're strange messages. And so I actually had to go to the bookstore. I went to a used bookstore and went to their like philosophy and spirituality sections and started browsing around trying to figure out what these messages meant and what they were talking about. And so that's what led me into looking into all these different, philosophers and spiritual traditions, was kind of this weird process of coming into contact with a spiritual being, which I didn't believe in spiritual beings, and then getting these very specific messages from somewhere or something and trying to figure out what they meant and what to do with those. And they were messages, like I said, of like, you get stuck in these negative thought patterns, you can change those by, practices or whatever. And so I would look into that and research it. And it led me on a long path of really diving into things like yoga at a very deep level, rather than just doing the kind of stretches and stuff. I, got a couple copies of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita and all these other, Indian scriptures and philosophical texts, and studied them and practiced very heavily for a number of years. And then I, studied Sufism and Kabbalah and Christian mysticism and magic and the Western esoteric traditions like Wicca and Hermeticism and all this kind of stuff. And I decided that instead of just kind of discounting all of these things, I would look at them through the lens of, well, these different traditions have been around for so long, and obviously people are getting benefits out of them. What are those benefits, and can I maybe get some of those as well? And so it changed my perspective on spirituality and spiritual traditions and spiritual practices into looking in at them as, how can I learn from them? How can I benefit from them, rather than just, oh, I think that's all nonsense, which is how I felt before. The concepts that were being referred to were often talked about within what people call like mystical traditions. So, every religion has kind of their exoteric, or like their normal kind of outward practice, going to church, praying, giving to the poor. Those are kind of the outward, exoteric parts of traditions. But most religions also have an esoteric or an inner tradition, which people call mystical. And so within like Islam, Sufism is called the mystical, like, part of Islam, or within Judaism, Kabbalah would be the mystical part. And what I found is that within those inner traditions, within the different, religions, there's actually a lot of commonality, and there's a big emphasis on personal relation to divinity rather than just communal actions. Having a personal relationship with your higher self or with God, which was a point of the messages that was very prominent to me. Was I grew up in the kind of religious environment where you just, you go to church and you sing worship songs and you do, but it wasn't an emphasis on your own personal relationship with divinity and your own like personal, like ethical, imperative. It was more of like, just follow these kind of rules rather than have a really deep and transformative relationship with divinity. And so that was one of the things I really liked about these different mystical traditions, and especially yoga and Vedanta, because the whole point of yoga is, and I was talking to someone about this morning, is to still the movements of your mind. But the reason you want to still the movements of your mind is because at that point, that's when you can actually see with clarity who you really are, and what we are, and who your brothers and sisters are, as children of God, essentially, is what the teaching is in yoga. Um, and so what happens is, if you're constantly caught up in all the different movements of your mind, they say, with the reactions to things or worries about things or whatever, it's like, you're looking at a pond or a lake, and the water is just rippling and rippling and rippling, and you can't really see what's underneath. And yoga is about just that practice of getting that water stiller and stiller and stiller, so that you can see through and actually see the truth behind reality, behind yourself, behind, every other human being you talk to. And that reality behind everything is God. It's that we're all God, and everything is. That's the philosophy of yoga, and it's basically the same philosophy in Sufism. They have a belief in the unity of all beings and the unity of all things. And then in Kabbalah, it's kind of the same thing as well. And I think it was just a really inspiring perspective on spirituality that I liked, that was different than what I had grown up with. And I found that, learning that, and then looking at their actual practices of what they do with that information. So not just the beliefs, but like the loving kindness meditation and the yoga practice, like I said, of being able to act with more clarity. I like to take all those different practices that I learned from these different traditions and use them to, improve myself in the way that I relate to people. It's made me more compassionate, and it's also allowed me to, manifest, I guess, the life that I've always wanted, at the same time.
Have you been able to do that, to manifest with your studies?
I mean, a very interesting thing happened. So I started studying magic, as far as like the Western esoteric tradition of magic, which a lot of people, the way they'll be familiar with that is kind of manifestation. That's the most popular kind of part of that people know. And yeah, the answer is just absolutely yes. My life is really unbelievably good. I try not to like boast or like brag about it, but my partner just turned to me the other day and she said, "You know, I'm living the life that 18-year-old me dreamed about. Like when I was 18 and I thought about my absolute dream life, if I could have everything that I wanted, that's the life she's living right now." And that's exactly how I feel. And it changed in 2020 when I started studying magic and putting it into practice. And I was very biased and prejudiced against all that kind of stuff because I'd grown up in a conservative Christian environment. I heard someone on a podcast talk about their magical practice and it triggered me and I thought, "Oh, that can't that's got to be all nonsense." You know, talking about whatever manifestation or practice or whatever they're talking about. And I realized that I was being prejudiced because I didn't know anything about their practice or their beliefs or anything. And I'm the kind of person who's been studying all these spiritual traditions for a very long time. And I thought, well, that's not right. I don't want to be prejudiced against someone else's beliefs or practice. So I wanted to learn. So I bought some books on like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and some like Wicca and stuff like that. And I started learning about their different practices. And I realized that most of it is just prayer. Almost all of magic is really just different kinds of prayer. And this that even came from a book from a Wiccan person that she even said that it's basically just prayer, which was interesting to me. And so it involves some ritual actions and stuff too, but every religion has rituals too. But what happened was I started doing this, and then within a month, I got a job offer for a job I wasn't looking for. That was the absolute perfect offer for me at the absolute perfect time, like the perfect day, perfect offer from someone I hadn't applied for the job, wasn't applying for any job, and it just came at the absolute opportune moment, and it allowed me to work from home during the pandemic, making just as much money, if actually more money than I was making before, instead of losing my job because I was working in a restaurant at the time. I probably would have lost my job. And then it came one after the other. These crazy coincidences kept happening, where it was like we got the exact, home we wanted, we got the job we wanted, we got it, everything just over and over and over and over again. All these things just kept happening that you could call synchronicities or coincidences, but I was doing these practices of trying to manifest these things in my life and they kept happening. So, and then here we are 4 years later and it's the same thing. It's like she told me, my partner told me about a bonus she was eligible for, and she was like, "I don't think my team's going to make it." And I was like, "They're going to make it." Next day she calls me, "Guess what, my team made this goal we were shooting for and I get my bonus." And it was a few days before the end of the month even. I was like, "I knew it, I told you." It's going to happen. So yeah, I think the practices have worked, but it's not but I have actual rituals and practices that I've created to manifest these things. And actually my partner and I created a system together that's in my second book, Luna, behind me, the one with the moon. And we created a system that is magical. Every intention that we put through that system ends up becoming a reality. So yeah, it works.
This is something that anybody can do. They don't have to
Oh,
be, trained in a certain religious belief for their whole life. They can just buy your book and be able to manifest.
I mean, you don't even have to buy my book because I don't want people to be like, "Oh, I have to spend money on a book." You buy my books, both of them, and absolutely. But it's all available for free on my website as well because I don't want to um, have people to go through a paywall to learn practices that can benefit them and their quality of life. So I have everything that I've taught available for free on my blog and on my YouTube as well if you want video guidance versus textual guidance. But yeah, in the books, I talk about very specific practices, and I have like daily checklists of like, do this meditation, do this breath work, do this yoga flow, for people who want more specific guidance. But essentially, my first book comes down to practices to help train your body and mind to be focused on your intentions rather than just reactive to your environment. So a lot of my first book has to do with cognitive science and psychology, and how practices like meditation and prayer and yoga can actually help you be more disciplined and more focused on your intentions and live more intentionally, that kind of thing. And it helps you get clarity on what you want as well at the same time, because I think that's a huge part where people just don't really know what they really want, because our culture is telling us, you want the newest iPhone, you want a new Tesla, you want a bigger house, but is that really what you want? Probably not. So the first book goes into that, and then the second book, Luna, is just a 4-part lunar ritual that goes with each phase of the moon, and it works with the energies of the lunar cycle. And it what it does is you pick an intention at the beginning of the cycle, and then at each lunar point, so like the new moon, the full moon, the first quarter and the third quarter moon, you check in on your intentions and you do a specific ritual with your partner if you have one, or by yourself. And what happens when you do that is you set an intention for the month, you communicate that to your partner, you communicate that to the universe or to God through the ritual, through the prayers. You solidify that because you actually create an object. You turn your intention into a magical object, and you can learn how to do that in my book or on my blog. It's really cool. And then you reaffirm that intention and you check in using tools like tarot to assess what's keeping you from reaching that intention. What do you need to focus on to move forward? And you check in every week, because each week there's a new ritual during each phase of the moon. So over the 28-day lunar month, you create an intention, you actually crystallize that into physical form, and then you remind yourself of that every 7 days, and you do it with a partner, and you communicate with your partner about that. And so it's not magic, it's psychology and cognitive science that I've turned into magical rituals. Sorry, my cat's trying to jump up here. um I've turned these into magical rituals, and the format and everything is very heavily influenced by like Wiccan rituals. Um, but I can explain why it works without any kind of magic or spiritual effect being necessary. I think that is happening too, but when you are so clear on your intentions and you remind yourself of those regularly, and you talk about them with your partner, you set sacred time aside to do that every week, that radically transforms your life, you know. I mean, if you can think about that, most people's relationships, I mean, are you spending an hour a week talking with your partner about your deepest intentions and goals, and what's keeping you from those, and what's keeping from them, and how you can help each other and that kind of thing? Even if you just did that without the ritual parts of it, it would still be a really powerful practice, you know?
This isn't any religious affiliation, like you were saying, because some people might think maybe it's
Hmm.
sort of like witchcraft or something like that, but it's not.
No,
It's all just kind of laws of nature.
exactly. So I take inspiration from things like witchcraft and yoga and Christian mysticism and Kabbalah. I learned from them because I actually did their practices the way they teach them for years. So I would study their scriptures, do their practices, whatever, eat their diet. I mean, immerse myself in that tradition for years until I figured out why certain why they had those practices, why they had those beliefs, and why they benefit people. And then I can take extrapolate from those and find ways to apply that in a non-denominational way, And so my books are not like Christian, they're not, Muslim, they're not Wiccan, they're not any of those. But I'm a Christian, and so I will in my book give you an example of my prayer, and in my prayer I'll make some references that are explicitly Christian. But what I do is I say you don't have to be a Christian to make use of this. Everyone prays. You don't have to be a Christian to pray, right? But we don't have a monopoly on that or anything. Thank God. It's a really powerful practice. I know secular people who pray still, scientists and people. And so, yeah, the way my books are written, the way my blog posts are written, it's a guide for anyone to implement these. And then I do say, hey, if you are Christian, if you are Jewish or Hindu or whatever, you can just modify these certain parts of the practices, like for instance the prayer, add whatever deity you want to pray to there. Like you don't have to pray to Jesus, you can pray to whoever you want. And so, yeah, you don't have to be any part of a religion at all to make use of these. You could do the rituals and the practices from a purely secular point of view, and I have friends who do. Um, or you could adapt it to whatever religious tradition you're coming from. And that's always been the goal of my work, is to bring people together across both religious boundaries and from the scientific and religious worlds, because I kind of live with one foot in both of those worlds myself.
Do you feel like you were given these experiences, this near death experience where you almost died, and then another, spiritually transformative experience where you just kind of completely changed the way you believe? Do you believe those experiences came to result in this work?
Yeah, in that second experience, there was a point where I was, out of my body there, and it felt like heaven, I guess, like absolute peace and bliss, like overwhelming. Just the way a lot of people describe when they have a near death experience and they go to heaven, you just feel no pain, no worry, total peace, total bliss, right? And I remember very specifically thinking, uh I'm good. I want to stay here. This is awesome. Like I don't need to go back to that life down there in my body, and with I was like, I am good. I'll stay here. This is heaven. This is amazing. Like awesome. And I got this very clear, very direct message from God or that angel or whatever it was, that no, 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 no. This isn't your time. You have work to do. Go tell people. It was basically like go tell people the good news was essentially the message I got. And I didn't know what that was. I was like, tell people what? I tell people I met God, they'll think I'm crazy. And so, yeah, I very much was given a message that I needed to get out there and help people, and teach them the kind of things that helped improve my own quality of life so much, because I know I'm not the only one who struggled with depressive rumination. I know I'm not the only one who struggled with crippling anxiety and feeling unworthy and those kinds of things. I know a lot of people struggle with those issues, and I know a lot of people struggle with the existential fear of not knowing what happens after death, or if we're actual spiritual beings, or if there's a God or not. These kinds of questions. I know a lot of people suffer because they're not sure about those kinds of things. And so I was definitely given a message that I had some kind of role to play to help teach people. I just didn't know what that was for a long time. And I did a lot of reading and practicing and research and personal development before I felt like I could even begin to try and teach anyone anything. I guess.
On that note, what do you believe happens when we die?
Yeah, I think that that's always the $1 million question. Um, I think that whatever this life is, it's preparation for that. And so I think what happens is that we get to experience consciousness from a higher level. And I think what that is that we don't have the limitations of, you know, a single perspective. Like we have a fixed point of focus that we experience the world from because we have our physical bodies. I think there might be something like a multi-focus or a non-linear kind of focus of consciousness, so not limited by physical space and limitations. And so I think what that is that we'll kind of know everything, I guess. And so I think we kind of continue to exist as separate spiritual beings, but that the barriers of knowledge and the separation between us is kind of mostly dissolved. It's my thoughts. And so we have to learn about limitations and we have to learn about suffering and stuff in this life so that we really appreciate the next step of consciousness. I think is what happens when we die. I think we get to experience something that's so intense and so good and so vast that we wouldn't fully appreciate it if we didn't understand limitations and we didn't have experience with this life, with physical living and suffering and being limited and not knowing what other people are thinking and not knowing what other people have done. I think it'll be very obvious in that next life. And I think that without this kind of learning experience to go through, that we wouldn't be able to navigate that to the fullest. And so I think that God or the universe or our consciousness knows that in order to get the most out of that next higher life, that we need to have some time to play around here and kind of learn how to be a conscious being, how to be compassionate and how to be helpful.
And would you say that your work, your books would help to contribute to that learning, to figuring out who we really are, how powerful we are, the creators that we are?
Yeah, that's the point. That's my hope anyways, with everything that I teach. Like I said, the whole point of yoga is to be able to have enough stillness to be able to see clearly who we really are and who our brothers and sisters really are too. It's important. Sometimes people get stuck on themselves and seeing the divinity within themselves, but I don't think that's the end. I think we also need to see that in everyone else, and that's when it really changes how you interact with people. So many people dehumanize others in different ways, and this is like the ultimate humanizing kind of process of really seeing the divinity in everyone else, and that's a teaching that is absolutely fundamental to Vedanta and Indian philosophy and yoga, and something that I think is very important for people to learn. And the way to learn that is to get clarity and stillness within yourself and not be so reactive all the time to all the chaos around us.
And if my viewers wanted to check out your website or purchase your books, or if they had questions for you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so just my name, justinberkholz.com is my website. And like I said, from there you can pretty much find almost all of my work, available for free. A lot of rituals, a lot of meditation, spiritual practices, prayers, and teachings on saints. Their lives and stuff like that. All that's found on the blog. I also have a YouTube channel. Once again, it's just my name. I'm not good with coming up with fancy, catchy titles or anything. I like to keep it simple. So if you just search my name on YouTube, or maybe you can put a link, in the description or something. I have a YouTube channel where same thing. I do reviews of spiritual books. I do biographical accounts of saints and mystics. I have teachings on yoga and stuff like that. Um, or you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. I have those profiles as well, and I post stuff on there. And you can contact me that way. Or you can email me, and it's just my name, Birkholz Justin. So it's very simple to contact me any of those ways. And my books are found on Amazon. So if you search my name on Amazon. You can find both my books and my podcast there. And I also have them for sale directly from my publisher. If you want to support me a little more, and not have Amazon take their huge cut, you can find links directly from my publisher on my blog to purchase my books as well, or on any of my YouTube videos. If you look in the description, there's a link to buy my books. And yeah, I have two of them so far. They're a 30-day program of how to introduce positive spiritual practices into your life, the science behind why they work, how to modify them to fit your spiritual beliefs. And it comes with a daily checklist of exactly which practices to do on which days. And every day of the 30-day program, I've included um, poetry, parables, little sayings like that I've written over the years in Foundations. And then in Luna, it contains facts and myths and meditations on the moon for each day.
If you had one message that you'd hope the audience would take from our conversation today, what would it be?
I'll have to turn to my friend Aldous Huxley here, who's been one of the biggest influences on my life. Really famous, philosopher and mystic. And he said after all of the learning he did, because he learned more about all the spiritual traditions than I know. I've just followed his footsteps. He said at the end of his life, it all came down to one thing. You can study all the philosophy you want and everything, do all the practices you want, but really, the best thing that we can do is just be a little kinder to each other. I think that's the most important thing is in every interaction you have with another human being, just try to think, how can I be kind to this person and uplift them?
That is a lovely message. I absolutely love it. Thank you, Justin. This has been very interesting. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your experience and your work with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, if anyone has any questions for me or wants to check out my work, feel free to reach out. I do respond to messages and emails and stuff. So if you have any questions, yeah, feel free.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.